If you've ever wondered why it is that I like to speak about purpose and healing and spirituality and trauma and suffering, it can be linked back to one particular event, a near-death experience that I had while I was suffering with a brain tumour. Roughly 10 days before I went for brain surgery, I had to have my blood platelets checked, and I would fall into seizure, and I would have an incredible experience that didn't make sense until eventually I would use DMT, a potent psychedelic, which allowed me to make sense of my near-death experience, having had a similar experience through a psychedelic experience with DMT. So, welcome back to Symbiotic Vibration, everybody. Another video, another day. It is a Sunday today. The sun is rising beautifully, so I hope that we're not overexposed here. If you're new to this channel, welcome to Symbiotic Vibration. My name is Evan. I had a brain tumour in my early 20s. I draw from the experience of suffering with a brain tumour, having surgery, hindsight, research, and general life experience to try and help others. I do a series called The Survivor's Guide to Survival, and outside of that, I make random videos like this. If you are looking for quick stimuli and lots of pictures and lots of music and lots of cutscenes, then you've come to the wrong place. But if you're looking for a relaxing conversation and a very deep, thought-provoking topic, well then, strap in, because we might be here for about 10 or 15 minutes speaking about my near-death experience. So, to give you a brief synopsis, firstly, I would say go back and watch my videos if you want to know more about my brain tumour and brain surgery. I have plenty of videos at this point with regards to it. If you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to. I would love that. We've crossed the 400 threshold now. Thank you all, you beautiful souls. So, prior to this near-death experience, I would have had a brain tumour on my pineal gland since birth, which became problematic and symptomatic when I was 23. And I was roughly 25. Yes, I was 25 when I had this near-death experience. I was at the point where my brain tumour was blocking the cerebrospinal fluid from flowing properly from my spine into the aqueductus sylvius where the pineal gland exists. And because the tumour was swelling to a point where it was stopping the cerebrospinal fluid, I was starting to have seizures. And this was an indication to my surgeon, this beautiful angel who saved my life, that I was near death, because if the cerebrospinal fluid does not flow into our brains and out into our spine correctly, then it's game over. So, my brain surgery date was set, and I would have to have my blood platelets checked prior to, as well as many other different blood tests, but the blood platelets was very important, so I had to go to Dublin to St. Joseph's Hospital to get this check done. And at the time, I was having seizures at night time. I was very much at the end. I could feel it, my life force draining, my energy draining, and I went in. I was getting my blood taken. A lot of blood is needed for the blood platelets, and my father was with me, as well as a nurse. And what's interesting is I wasn't able to get this surgery in Ireland, so I would have to leave Ireland to get it done. And so any doctors that I was going to see at the time weren't really able to take responsibility for me, because I wasn't in the hands of the Irish medical system as such. And so it was relatively unknown as to what was happening to me, because in Ireland at the time, they didn't even diagnose my tumour as a tumour. They had diagnosed it as a cyst, and they didn't believe it was a tumour. But my surgeon, who had done 9,800 and something surgeries at this point, was well aware of what was happening to me, and that it was a tumour and that it was growing. But we'll get into that. We already have gotten into that. You can go watch other videos. But anyway, I got my blood taken, and I blacked out immediately. So a couple of vials of blood in, I blacked out. From my father's perspective, I fell to the floor, off the bed, and I started a seizure, wherein I was in convulsions. There was foam building in my mouth, And from his perspective, there was 2 different seizures. There was one that roughly lasted a minute or so, maybe 2 minutes. And then there was the break, wherein I was silent, still, and then another one, which altogether could have lasted 3-4 minutes. I'm not 100% sure. While that was happening to me, the nurse was running around screaming, looking for a doctor, because she didn't have any understanding as to what was happening to me. And in a strange way, I was being vindicated because I was told that my brain cyst was asymptomatic, when in reality it was growing and killing me, and it was a tumour. And so there was a strange sense of vindication as I was flopping on the floor here in seizure. But anyway, from my perspective, what happened was I left the room in which I was in, and I started flying through geometric tunnels. Now, if you go and listen to near-death experiences, you will hear this very often, that there's these tunnels that people get drawn into when they're in a near-death experience. And so I'm going to be that cliche guy, and I'm going to mention the tunnels too. And for great reason, we'll get to that when we speak about DMT. But during the flight through these tunnels, I would have no perspective as to who I was. I didn't have any awareness as to the fact that I was a human, or that I was Evan, or that I just had a life experience. In fact, I had no perspective whatsoever with regards to what was happening. It was just this incredibly blissful experience wherein I was no longer a body. I no longer felt like I had eyes. I just felt like I was existence as such. To me, it felt like I was a ball, like an egg shape, and flying through these tunnels. The tunnels would be almost instantaneous, like through a tunnel. And then I would end up in an array of beautiful backdrops and beautiful landmarks across Earth. I only remember possibly 3 or 4, and the rest were all random areas that I wasn't aware of. But I remember seeing the Eiffel Tower, but I wasn't underneath it. I was floating around it when I came out of one of these tunnels. I remember seeing the Colosseum, again, floating around. I remember seeing the Sphinx, again, floating around from an aerial perspective, almost like a helicopter perspective, like I was a floating egg flying through these tunnels, just observing. And then an array of other places that I had no conscious awareness of. So you had all these different waterfalls, these spectacular landmarks across Earth that I had no recollection of. And even at the time, I didn't know the Colosseum was the Colosseum, or the Sphinx was the Sphinx, or the Eiffel Tower was the Eiffel Tower. They were just experience. And so while I'm floating around in these tunnels, my father is holding me and he's shouting my name, and he's asking me to come back, and he's calling my mother, and he's telling her like he thinks this might be the end for our son. And I'm in these tunnels. And in the last tunnel, another instantaneous whoosh, I open my eyes and I'm in my body again, and I'm staring at my dad. And he says, "Do you know who I am?" I say, "I do." "What happened?" And we got home eventually, and I had no idea as to what had just happened. Now, bear in mind, I had used psychedelics beforehand. I had used lots of mushrooms in the past. I had used lots of marijuana in the past. I had used some LSD in the past. So I had an idea that there was something far stranger happening on this planet than just being in a human body. I had an idea, but I always felt skeptical, and I most certainly felt skeptical while I was ill, because I had a lot of resentment for what was happening to me, and I felt a disconnect from the universe more than ever, because I felt, well, if karma is a real thing, then why am I here? So I kind of disconnected myself from the universe for a little while. Well, you can't, but I tried. And yeah, I suppose I just swept that experience under the rug. I didn't know how to process what had happened. It just felt like a dream. and I was ill and I was almost dead at the time, so I didn't really have much enthusiasm for the experience of life. I just wanted to have my brain surgery and I just wanted to live. And so I would have my brain surgery and I would go into recovery mode. And if you want to go back and watch any of my videos, you can. There's so much information with regards to this, and I'm not going to go into it right now. But let's fast forward a year and a half, roughly, later. Things are going a little bit better in life. I have a business. I'm making some money. I'm living. But again, I had repressed all of my trauma. And that's one of the reasons why I make these videos, because I like to share my experience in hope that it helps others, but we won't get into that. Eventually, I would have the opportunity to use DMT, dimethyltryptophan, I believe is what it's called. It's a potent psychedelic. If you're watching this and you feel the need to use psychedelics, I would do so in the safe hands of a practitioner. I no longer advocate for the fun usage of psychedelics. And this is all personal. I am not telling anybody to do psychedelics. In fact, I would always tell people, if they are going to do psychedelics, to find someone who is well studied and well practiced, somebody who can hold space and somebody who can protect somebody in those realms. But anyway, I use DMT. I suck it from the pipe. 3 large inhales, and a hole opens up in front of me, a portal opens up on the wall that I'm staring at and sucks me in. And while I'm in that hole, I go through all of these geometric tunnels in the exact same means as I did while I was having that near-death experience. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Flying, only this time some of them were slightly slower and I was receiving insights and receiving voices from the tunnels themselves, but alas, they were entering the very same spaces, going around, checking out landmarks all across Earth. And I came back roughly 10 minutes later to my flesh. And immediately I knew what had happened in that hospital. Immediately I was like, whoa, it all just made total sense. So to my head, I was dying. My body was releasing DMT and it was allowing me to cross. It was allowing me to enter some psychedelic state, my soul. I can't really describe what I'm saying. I don't have the language for it right now, but we will revisit this in the future. But what I'm saying is this: if I can have an experience from a near-death experience that is almost exactly reminiscent of an experience that I can have in a DMT experience, and then we link them together, it's the first time in my life at that moment when I realized, wow, we really are souls. We really are. And there's something very special happening down here that I cannot describe. It is ineffable. I'm not going to speak in definites ever. But there's something magical happening in this realm. We've been created by something far more intelligent than us, and we are all a part of it, it would seem. And so that was the moment in my life when I realized I was a soul. I'm not just a human. I am something far more intelligent. Something incredible. And it has opened my mind. It has opened my eyes to experience. It has dissolved my fear of dying, which is something I held on to very deeply as a child all the way through. I still have moments of wherein I fear the pain of dying, but not dying itself. In fact, there's a strange part of me that is excited to die, but also does not want to die quickly. But there is a part of me that is excited to experience what that was in its totality. I do believe that I was given a sneak peek into what perhaps could happen after life, without the chance to truly leave this realm, because my soul always knew it was coming back. But it was almost as if I was gifted with an opportunity to truly understand what I was, and to dissolve that fear of death, and to allow me to come back with a true purpose. Now, that purpose came with a cost. I had to experience a brain tumour, I had to experience a lot of addiction, a lot of suffering, and eventually I would open myself up to my purpose here, or at least some of it, which is symbiotic vibration. This is what I'm doing. I'm trying to draw from these experiences to help people, and I have so many beautiful visions for the future. So if you are still watching this, you're amazing for staying here, and I'm a big fan of you. I love you, and I would subscribe. Yeah, join the Symbiotic family. We're building strong now, and people are starting to recognize what we're doing here. We're trying to build a beautiful community of souls that wish to help each other, that wish to stand by each other on their journeys, and share bits of their own experiences along the way, and connect via the comment sections. And yeah, hopefully eventually we'll have some form of platform, and most certainly in the physical, some form of retreat or whatnot. But for now, we continue to make videos, and we continue to connect on the virtual realms. And yeah, I suppose just to go back to it and quickly synopsize, there's also a part of me then that almost isn't afraid to die. So there was a part of me that went relentlessly fast, wanted all the drugs, wanted all the business, just wanted to live in the fast lane and quench out quickly, to burn out, because there was no fear of death. Eventually that would stop. There still is no fear of death, only I do have a purpose here, and I do like the idea of my life lasting a lot longer than I did back then. And there's also a deep sense of belonging, a deep sense of connection to the universe, to God, to whatever it is that we call it, this universal energy that we're all divinely connected to. I feel so intimately connected to it now. No fear whatsoever that this is all just coincidence, that we end up in a coincidental bag of meat and we just die and our existence ceases forever. That's just not happening. And I have personal, tangible evidence. That's not to say that this is a definite, but to me, it is a definite. And I hope that because I've had this experience, you're now watching this, perhaps you have a little bit more comfort in the idea of what's coming in the afterlife, and that death is not to be feared. And I suppose I'll finish it on this. I think for me, I have had fear with regards to my heart and heart attacks, deriving from family patterns, deriving from movies that I watched when I was younger, deriving from conversations that I've had with regards to heart attacks, etc. So there was always, and still remains sometimes, a fear of the pain of death, not the actual death itself. But to me, I've started to recognize there's so much painless time that we spend in life. And I've had a brain tumour, I've suffered for many, many years, but I've lived pain-free for many more years than that, and I will continue to. And if it is something like a heart attack or a stroke or something painful in the end that takes us out, isn't it worth having all of this beautiful, pain-free, glorious existence for a short stint of pain before we eventually cross into whatever realm we are going towards? Or perhaps we're coming back here. Who knows? Who knows? So, I think I'm finished. I hope this whole shot wasn't overexposed. I can see that my jumper is quite overexposed. We'll see. I'll leave it at that. I hope that you enjoyed my story. We will revisit this in the future when I have an editor and somebody who can bring in all of these cool tunnels and beautiful edits. For now, it's just me, Evan, my camera, and his beautiful natural backdrop, and this beautiful, lovely flower. I love you all. Thank you for being here, and we'll talk to you next time, eh?